finally, I do want to say just a few words, if however briefly, about the rhetorical style that Douglas employs in the text. One of the things that I think is most remarkable about the text, we talked a little bit about the bitter sarcasm and the disgust that sort of, despite the fact that you get the sense that he's trying to hold back and not use hyperbole and not do over the top sorts of examples, he can't help some of the disgust and sarcasm escaping, his mouth as much as he's trying to hold back. We talked about the recently converted master who, after getting religion, cruelly tosses a girl out to starve. You get this sense that there's a stoicism in the text, and as you read through it, think about this. See if you don't see what I see in it. Maybe you don't, but it's hard for me every time I read this not to see a kind of an intentional stoic attitude in the text that suggests emotional resignation. This is not a text that, despite the cruelty of the events being described, despite the mistreatment, despite all of this, it's not a text that's highly emotional. It actually is surprisingly matter-of-fact when it gives details. Look at the details of the Denby murder. He's quite cool and calm. He doesn't go over the top. He doesn't say, "Oh, this cruel, wicked man, evil, evil man, rah, rah, rah." He doesn't really do that. He gives it as a kind of a journalistic, straightforward, just the facts, ma'am kind of detail. And yet, underneath those objective words, you get this feeling or sense that there is a seething disgust or rage at what's going on. It's kind of, at any moment, you think he could burst forward in uncontrolled rage, but he doesn't. It's quite controlled. It's a kind of controlled anger that is put forward in an unemotional way, but underneath it you can see that there's a considerable amount of emotion behind what he's saying. Look at the example that of the Denby situation, probably the most horrific situation because it's so cold-blooded. After the murder of Denby, he offers some details about Mr. Gore, the guy who kills him, and this is partly done to make sure that the audience realizes, no, I didn't make this stuff up. This is for real. I know it. I saw it. Everybody there saw it. There were dozens and dozens of witnesses. He says, Mr. Gore lived in St. Michael's, Talbot County, Maryland, when I left there. And if he is still alive, he very probably lives there now. And if so, he is now, as he was then, as highly esteemed and as much respected as though his guilty soul had not been stained with his brother's blood. He practically gives you this man's address. This man's name was Gore, Gore, St. Michael's, Talbot County, Maryland. Practically gives you, he lived at 107 South Main Street. He's about 6'2", 185 pounds. I mean, he says this man is alive today. You can go down there and you can look him up, and he is still alive today, last I heard. And he is still as guilty of murder as he ever was. This is, and for him to use some details that are chilling, but to not lose it emotionally when he's doing it takes a considerable amount of self-control. That's the dominant sort of tone of the text that I see as I read through it each time. He never argues for the slave's humanity so much. He never says, we are people, we are people. He might do that sort of indirectly as he shows, the creativity of slaves, the ingenuity of slaves, the humanness, the ordinariness of slaves. But he doesn't feel like he has to put forward some aggressive argument. Yes, we are people. He just won't do it. His attitude is, it is self-evident that we're human. If you don't accept that we are human, then there's just something wrong with your eyes and your brain. I'm not going to sit there and pound the table and argue that I'm a human being. I shouldn't have to do that. It's self-evident, dang it. Instead, what he does is he takes the offensive, not the defensive, to try to defend his humanity. I'm a human being. being. He doesn't do that. Instead, he goes on the offensive, which I think marks the text as being very, very savvy rhetorically, to indict a hypocritical society that seems to be self-satisfied and complacent. We're so free. We're so wonderful. This is God's country. We've done so much. We've fought the revolution. We have a Bill of Rights. We have a Constitution, Declaration of Independence. Why? There's opportunity in America. And essentially, what Douglas is saying is, yeah, if you overlook all of the people who are being cruelly mistreated and treated as property, even though you and I and everyone else on God's green earth knows that they're human beings, sure. You know, if you're willing to overlook the fact that a third of the people in the country, and certainly 50% of the people in the South, are treated as subhuman when it's clear that they are, then it's a wonderful place. If you're white, male, and wealthy, it's a terrific place. But if you're not, it doesn't live up to the standards that it sets for itself. And so what he's trying to do is to say, he's trying to appeal to, as Lincoln would say, the better angels of the better angels of our nature, and to say, look, we're a society that came up with these ideas of equality and of rights and of dignity. Why don't we just simply follow through with that? And stop patting ourselves on the back and saying, look at what we've done in the last 80 years. We're so wonderful. We're so great. And realize that the job's is not over yet. So he wants to indict the hypocrisy of the society without alienating the audience, but to say, how Christian are we? How democratic are we? How good are we? How free are we when a huge portion of the society, we just don't seem to want to deal with this issue. We want to just make it go away, and it's not going to go away. So he has to walk a very fine line rhetorically, and does so with an incredible degree of finesse.